I lost my job and asked my son's wife if I could stay with them for a while. She said, "You can stay with us if you pay for your living expenses." And my son supported her decision. A white envelope was lying on my desk when I returned from lunch. I noticed it as soon as I opened the office door. It was ordinary office paper, but too thin for a bill, too formal for advertising, too white for ordinary correspondence. I knew what was inside before I even opened it. At Dr. Harrison's dental clinic, envelopes like this only appeared for one reason. My full name was printed on the envelope, Estelle Cornelia Bryson. No one had called me by my full name in 20 years. Even Roland just called me Estelle. My full name meant official papers, bad news, the end of something important. Dear Mrs. Bryson, due to staff optimization and the need to reduce the clinic's operating costs. I didn't even finish reading it. I just put the letter down and immediately looked at the date. Today was Friday, October 23rd, my last day at work. 14 years as an administrator, 14 years of daily calls to patients with appointment reminders, 14 years of smiles at the reception desk, and it all ends with a white envelope on Friday afternoon. I looked around my office. It was a small, windowless room with only a desk, 2 chairs, and a metal filing cabinet. On the wall hung a calendar with photos of desert landscapes in Arizona, a gift from a pharmaceutical company. October showed the red rocks of Sedona, where Roland and I had spent our honeymoon 39 years ago. Dr. Harrison didn't even come out to talk to me in person. He sent Cheryl from HR, who had only been working there for 2 years and barely knew my name. She stood in the doorway of my office, nervously fiddling with her tablet and mumbling something about difficult times and the economic situation. The words sounded rehearsed, as if she had practiced them at home in front of the mirror. I nodded and thought about how Roland always said, "They'll never fire you, Estelle. You're irreplaceable. Who else knows all these patients by heart? Who remembers that Mrs. Fernandez is afraid of drills and Mr. Johnson is always half an hour late?" Roland was proud that his wife was important, needed, that without her the clinic couldn't run as smoothly. Roland was wrong. At 67, no one is irreplaceable. At any age, to be honest. Cheryl finally left, wishing me good luck in my future endeavors. Another memorized phrase. I was left alone in the office and began gathering my personal belongings. There wasn't much. A photo of Roland and me at a picnic in Sedona, where he's hugging me around the shoulders and I'm laughing at one of his jokes. A small cactus in a terracotta pot that patients gave me last Christmas. A box of joint vitamins that I kept in my desk. A mug with the words, "Best Grandma Ever." A gift from Hunter when he was 8. Everything fit into a small cardboard box that had once held copy paper. 14 years of life in a box measuring 30 by 20 centimeters. The drive home took 20 minutes. I drove slowly, taking my time, not thinking about having to get up early tomorrow for the first time in many years. Traffic lights, familiar stores, gas stations. Everything looked normal, but it seemed somehow distant, as if I were looking at my life through someone else's eyes. At home, I put the box on the kitchen table and took all the bank statements out of the filing cabinet in the living room. Roland had always taken care of the finances, carefully keeping track of income and expenses in a small notebook that he had bought at the same stationery store for 20 years. After he died, I just kept living on my salary and spending my savings on little things, not really thinking about the future. Why should I? I had a stable job, a modest but sufficient salary, and it seemed like it would always be that way. I didn't think I'd have to count everything so carefully. My savings were melting away faster than I realized. Roof repairs after last year's winter rains, $2,300. New tires for the car in the spring, $450. Expensive blood pressure medication, which insurance only partially covers, was $90 a month. Plus Roland's funeral 5 years ago. I didn't skimp on the coffin or the wake. I wanted everything to be dignified for a man who had worked as a mechanic in a car repair shop for 31 years and never took a sick day. The calculator showed numbers I didn't like. I had $4,200 in my savings account, another $800 in my checking account. With the strictest economy, counting only the bare necessities, utilities, food, medicine, gas, the money would last 3 months, Maybe 4 if I really tightened my belt and stopped buying anything except rice and canned food. But who would hire a woman my age? I honestly tried to find another job back in the spring when talk of a difficult economic situation began at the clinic. I sent my resume to 5 other clinics, 2 hospitals, and even a private cosmetology practice. I received 3 rejections and 2 no responses. Even if I find a job, the salary will be half of what I earned working for Dr. Harrison. And most likely, they would offer me a part-time job with no insurance. I put down the calculator and looked at my phone. It was 6:30 in the evening. I needed to call Curtis. My son didn't answer right away. I listened to the long beeps and imagined him looking at the screen, seeing Mom, and deciding whether to answer or not. He was probably busy. It was Friday, the end of the workday, and air conditioning repairmen are always swamped in Arizona, especially after a hot summer. When he finally picked up, I heard the sound of cars in the background and his slightly irritated voice. "Hi, Mom. What's wrong?" Why do kids always think something bad has happened when their parents call? Well, this time they were right. "I got fired today, Curtis." Pause. The sound of engines, someone shouting in the background. Damn. Seriously? What for? Downsizing. They're cutting back on salaries. Well, Mom, that sucks. Did they give you any severance pay? 2 weeks' salary. I didn't bother explaining that for a woman my age, that was almost nothing. Listen, I'm out on a call right now. A lady's air conditioner broke down and she's freaking out. I'll call you back tonight and we'll talk, okay? But I knew he wouldn't call back that night. Curtis never called back when he said he would. He would come home tired. Meadow would tell him about her day, the kids would ask for help with their homework or a ride somewhere, and he would just forget. I had to say it now. "Curtis, I need to ask you something." Another pause. A longer one this time. "Mom, I really can't talk right now. A client is waiting. I need a place to stay, just for a little while." I remembered how he came to see me 2 months ago in August. He stopped by for a minute to see how I was doing and pick up some tools he had borrowed from my late father. I baked his favorite apple pie with cinnamon, the same one I used to bake for him on his birthday when he was a child. I set the table, took out the good plates, and made coffee. But he only stayed for an hour, staring at his phone the whole time. He replied to messages in work chats, checked his email, and typed something with his thumbs. When I asked how his grandchildren were doing, he replied distractedly, "They're fine. Hunter is playing soccer. Ivy signed up for drum lessons," and buried his face in his phone again. He ate the pie standing up, washing it down with cold coffee, said, "Thanks, Mom, it's delicious," and hurried away. "Well, Mom, it's not just my decision, you know?" Of course, it wasn't just his. Curtis has a wife. Meadow always has a strong opinion on every issue, especially when it comes to money or inconvenience. She's a nurse, used to order and planning. Extra people in the house disrupt her plans. I'll have to talk to Meadow about this. I can't just say, "Come and live with us. We have children, a mortgage, all kinds of expenses." I understand, Curtis. Give me until Sunday, okay? I'll have a serious talk with her. We'll work something out. Okay. Mom, I really have to go. This woman is calling for the 3rd time. She's going to start complaining about me. Let's talk later, okay? He hung up, and I sat there in the kitchen with the phone in my hand. It was already getting dark outside. October days in Scottsdale are short, and the sun sets early. I turned on the light above the table and looked again at the bank papers spread out in front of me. Sunday. 2 days for Meadow to decide whether to let her mother-in-law into the house. I wonder how they would discuss this issue. Probably over dinner, when the children went to their rooms to do their homework. Meadow would say something about the extra expense for food and utilities. Curtis would nod and agree, as he always did when he didn't want to argue with his wife. I put the documents away in a folder and made myself a modest dinner, a turkey sandwich with a lettuce leaf and a glass of milk. I turned on the TV in the living room. The evening news was on. Another accident at the intersection of the 10th and 101st highways, the weekend weather forecast, an advertisement for new mattresses with a 50% discount, a typical Friday in a typical city. After the news, there was some detective show. I didn't follow the plot, just listened to the voices so it wouldn't be so quiet in the house. Roland loved detective shows, especially the old ones with Columbo or Perry Mason. He said that at least in those shows you could tell who was good and who was bad. At 10 o'clock, I turned off the TV and went to the bathroom. I washed my face, brushed my teeth, and took my blood pressure pill. In the mirror, I saw the tired face of a woman who had suddenly grown old. When had that happened? That morning, I had felt like Estelle, but now I saw an elderly woman with no job and almost no money. But I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the clock ticking in the hall. A large wall clock with a pendulum that Roland had bought at a flea market 20 years ago. He always complained about that clock, saying it was too loud and kept him awake, but I had grown accustomed to falling asleep to its steady ticking. After he died, the sound of the clock was the only thing that broke the silence in the house at night. Now every tick reminded me of the time passing, the money running out, the future becoming uncertain. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Seconds turned into minutes, minutes into hours, and every second brought me closer to Sunday, when Curtis would tell me what Meadow had decided. At 3 in the morning, I gave up, got out of bed, and walked to the kitchen in my robe and old slippers. I brewed some chamomile tea in a cup with a chipped handle. Roland always said it was a shame to throw it away if it still held water. The house seemed too big and too quiet. Roland bought it 32 years ago when Curtis started first grade and we needed a good school district. Back then, we really needed 3 bedrooms, a big kitchen for family dinners, and a backyard for weekend barbecues. Roland dreamed of grandchildren running around the yard, of holidays when the house would be filled with voices and laughter. The grandchildren grew up, but they rarely visit our house. They celebrate holidays at their own homes now. It's more convenient, says Meadow. Now I'm alone in a house with too many rooms and too many memories. I sat in the kitchen, slowly sipping hot tea and thinking that tomorrow was Saturday. The day after tomorrow was Sunday, and on Sunday, Curtis would give me his answer. I wonder what he and Meadow will talk about. Most likely money, as always. About how much an extra person in the house costs, about the utility bills that will go up, about the extra food in the fridge, about the inconveniences and the disruption to their normal life. The clock in the hall struck 4 in the morning. I finished my cold tea, rinsed the cup in the sink, and went back to bed. This time sleep came, but it was restless, full of strange dreams about white envelopes, empty offices, and phone calls that no one answered. Meadow called on Saturday evening when I was no longer expecting her. I was sitting in the living room watching a movie and trying not to think about tomorrow. The phone rang at 9:30, and the screen lit up with Meadow instead of Curtis. Estelle, hi. Curtis told me about your situation. Her voice was businesslike, as if she were calling to make a doctor's appointment. No, how are you, or I'm sorry. Straight to the point. We can talk tomorrow if you want. Come over at 11 in the morning. Sure, Meadow. Thanks for taking the time. See you then. She hung up, and I sat there with the phone in my hand. That's right. Meadow had taken control of the situation. Curtis had probably passed all the negotiations on to her, as he usually did when he didn't want to make difficult decisions. I didn't sleep well that night. I woke up at 6:30, even though my alarm was set for 9. I took a shower and put on my best dress, a dark blue one I had bought for Roland's funeral. I wanted to look respectable, to show that I wasn't a beggar who had come to ask for handouts. Curtis and Meadow's house was a 20-minute drive from mine, in a new neighborhood with neat single-story houses and manicured lawns. They had bought it 7 years ago when Curtis's business was doing well. The house was modest but modern, with 2 bedrooms, an open floor plan, and a small backyard with a pool. I parked on the driveway next to Curtis's white pickup truck. In the back seat of my car were 2 suitcases I had packed that morning, just in case. I didn't know how the conversation would end, but I wanted to be ready for anything. Meadow opened the door before I could ring the bell. She must have seen me pull up. She was wearing jeans and a white shirt, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. At 39, Meadow looked younger than her age, slender, fit, with sharp features and attentive gray eyes. Come in, Estelle. Would you like some coffee? Yes, thank you. We went into the kitchen. Curtis was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and a newspaper, but when I came in, he stood up and gave me an awkward hug. Hi, Mom. How are you? Fine, thanks. An awkward pause. Meadow poured me some coffee into a beautiful ceramic mug, part of a set I had given them for their housewarming. We sat down at the table, and I felt like I was at a job interview. "Curtis, can you check on the water heater in the garage?" Mito said. "There were strange noises again yesterday." Curtis nodded and hurried out. I realized that Mito wanted to talk to me alone. She waited until she heard the garage door slam shut, then turned to me. "Estelle, let's talk about everything honestly." She took a folder of documents out of the desk drawer and opened it in front of me. Inside were printed tables, neatly arranged by category. "These are our monthly expenses. I keep everything in Excel. It's easier to control the budget that way." The first table was called Utilities. The columns were electricity, gas, water, sewage, garbage, internet. Next to each item were the amounts. Electricity was $138 per month, gas was $45, water was $62. On average, utilities cost us $270 a month, plus internet, $49. That's $319. Meadow spoke calmly, businesslike, like a nurse explaining a procedure to a patient. "Next is food." She turned the page. The second table was even more detailed. The items were divided into categories: dairy, meat, vegetables, fruit, grains, and household chemicals. The last column showed the total amount, $480 per month. We buy groceries once a week, plus sometimes we buy a few small things. On average, it comes to about $500 for the whole family. I nodded and tried to understand where she was going with this. "You see, Estelle, if you live with us, the expenses will increase, definitely for food and for utilities too. You'll be using electricity, water, and the internet." "Of course, I understand. So I think it would be fair if you contributed to these expenses. Not all of it, of course, but some of it." Meadow took out a calculator and started calculating. "There are 4 of us in the family. If you're the 5th, your share will be 1/5 of the total expenses. But that would be too much for you, I understand. So I suggest 1/3. 1/3 of the utilities and 1/3 of the groceries." She showed me the numbers on the calculator. Utilities are $319, divided by 3 is $106. Food is $500, divided by 3 is $167. That's $273 a month. I looked at her neat numbers and thought about the $5,000 I had left for everything. At that rate, the money would last 18 months if I didn't spend anything else. "How are we going to keep track?" I asked. "It's very simple. I'll collect all the receipts from the supermarket, utility bills, everything else. At the end of every 2 weeks, I'll calculate your share and you'll reimburse me." Meadow showed me another table, a template for calculations. "Here, I'll write down all the expenses, and here, your share. Everything will be transparent and fair." The sound of tools working came from the garage. Curtis was either really fixing something or just giving us time to talk. "Estelle, I hope you understand that this is temporary." Meadow looked me in the eyes. There was no anger or hostility in her gaze, only practicality. "We can't support you forever. We have our own plans, our own goals. Curtis wants to start his own business, and we're saving up for that. Plus, there's the kids' education. Hunter will be going to college in a couple of years, and that's very expensive." "I understand, Meadow. I'll find a job, get on my feet, and move out." "Okay, then I guess we can give it a try." She gathered the papers into a folder and put them away in a drawer. "One more thing, you'll have to live in Hunter's room. He's moving to the basement. We've set him up there. It's small, but it's separate." At that moment, Curtis walked into the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. "So, is it settled?" Meadow nodded. "Estelle agrees to share the expenses, 1/3 of the utilities and groceries." "Great." Curtis looked relieved. "Mom, if you want, you can move in today. Why wait?" I looked at them both, a young couple deciding my fate at the kitchen table. Mito had already thought everything through, made tables, calculated my share in their lives. Curtis just agreed, as always. "My things are in the car." "Really?" Mito was surprised. "You were so sure we'd agree?" I was ready for anything. Curtis came out to the car with me and helped me get the suitcases out. 2 medium-sized suitcases and a cardboard box with photographs. That was all I decided to take from my home. The rest of my things remained there, waiting for an uncertain future. "Mom, everything will be fine," Curtis said as we carried the suitcases to the house. "This is only temporary. You'll find a job and everything will work out." I nodded, though I didn't believe his words. At 67, nothing gets better on its own. Hunter's room was small but cozy. A single bed, a desk, a wardrobe, a chest of drawers. On the walls hung posters of football players and actors I didn't know. Meadow quickly took them down and put them in a box. Hunter will take them to the basement. We heard the front door slam. Apparently the children had returned from somewhere. A minute later, a tall teenager with dark hair peeked into the room. My grandson Hunter. "Hi, Grandma." "Hi, dear." He looked around the room and saw my suitcases on his bed. "So I'm really moving to the basement?" "Hunter, we talked about this," Meadow said. "It's temporary." Hunter shrugged and started carrying his things out. His computer, his game console, a stack of books. He moved slowly, reluctantly, and I could see he didn't like the situation. "I hope I'll have some privacy down there," he muttered as he walked past me with a box of his things. Meadow pretended not to hear, but I caught his eye. The 16-year-old's eyes showed discontent and slight irritation. His grandmother had ruined his plans, taken his room, and forced him to move to the basement. In half an hour, Hunter had moved all his things. I was left alone in a room that smelled of teenage deodorant and something else I couldn't quite place. Childhood slipping away. I unpacked my things into the empty closet and put the photo of Roland on the dresser. At 7 o'clock, Meadow called everyone to dinner. I went down to the living room, where the whole family had gathered. Curtis was watching TV, Meadow was setting the table, Hunter was playing on his phone, and 14-year-old Ivy was reading a book in the corner of the sofa. "Ivy, say hello to your grandmother," Meadow said. The girl looked up and smiled at me politely but distantly. "Hi, Grandma Estelle." "Hi, sweetie, how's school?" "Fine." A short answer, like all teenagers. Ivy buried herself in her book again. Dinner was quiet. Meadow served baked chicken with potatoes and salad. It was a typical family meal, but I felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Everyone ate in silence, occasionally exchanging brief comments about their plans for tomorrow. After dinner, I helped Meadow clear the table. She was polite but reserved, as if we were discussing work matters. "I'll go to the supermarket in the morning," she said, loading the dishes into the dishwasher. "If you need anything special, like medicine or a particular food, let me know in advance." "Thanks, I don't need anything special." "Okay, I'll put the receipts in this folder." She showed me a yellow folder on the kitchen table. "We'll count them every 2 weeks." I nodded and went to my room. Hunter was just coming out of the basement with a dissatisfied look on his face. "It's damp down there," he said as he passed by, "and the internet connection is bad." Meadow sighed. "Hunter, hang in there. Everything will be fine soon." But we all knew that soon could mean months. The first 2 weeks flew by quickly. I tried to find my place in the house, not to interfere with the family's routine, to be grateful but inconspicuous. I got up at 6:30 when everyone was still asleep, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat in the kitchen, listening to the house gradually wake up. Meadow was the first to get up. At 6:15, she would come down to the kitchen, already dressed and combed, ready for the working day. She would see me at the table, nod, pour herself some coffee into a travel mug, and check something on her phone. We would exchange pleasantries about the weather, but mostly we were silent. Then the children got up. Hunter crawled out of the basement, sleepy and grumpy, grabbed a carton of milk from the fridge, poured it over his cereal, and ate standing at the sink. Ivy came down later, neat and tidy like her mother. She ate yogurt with muesli without looking up from her textbook. Curtis was the last to appear. He quickly drank his coffee, kissed Meadow on the cheek, said, "Bye, Mom," mechanically, and disappeared into the garage, where the engine of his pickup truck was rumbling. By 8 in the morning, the house was empty, and I was alone until evening. The days dragged on slowly. I studied the newspapers looking for job openings, called employment agencies, and filled out applications online. The result was predictable, either rejection or complete silence. I was invited to a few interviews, but as soon as they saw my age, the interviewers' faces became politely distant. At Kroger grocery store, I was told they were looking for a cashier, but then it turned out that the job required standing on my feet for 8 hours straight. At a dental clinic, the administrator said they would consider my application, but never called back. The most humiliating interview was at Sunset Manor, a nursing home. A young woman in a bright pink blouse explained that they were looking for a senior care assistant. "Do you have experience working with the elderly?" she asked, oblivious to the irony of the situation. "Some," I replied, glancing at the kitten calendar on her desk. "The pay is $9 an hour, rotating shifts, including weekends." I imagined myself changing diapers for people my age and thanked her for her time. At the end of the second week, Meadow knocked on my door on Sunday evening. She was holding a yellow folder with checks in her hands. "Estelle, let's do the math." We sat down at the kitchen table. Meadow laid out the checks in neat piles. Groceries, utilities, household cleaning supplies. I took out my calculator and started adding up the numbers. Groceries for 2 weeks, $173. Electricity, $60. Water, $31. Gas, $22. Internet, $25. She wrote the numbers in a table with columns already set up for my share. "That's a total of $320 for 2 weeks. Your third is $106.67. Let's round it up to $170. Meadow showed me the calculator with the total amount. "But that's not all. I bought laundry detergent for $8, toilet paper for $12, and dish soap for $4. Your share of that is another $8. She turned the page and showed me the new receipts. "And lastly, I bought meat for the barbecue yesterday when Curtis invited his friends over. You ate too, so your share is $9. The total came to $124, but Meadow was merciful. "Since the meat was for the guests, we'll write that off. That makes your total $84. I took 4 $20 bills and 4 $1 bills out of my wallet. Meadow counted them carefully and put the money in the envelope. "Thank you. I'll keep collecting the receipts." That was it. $84 for 2 weeks of living in my son's house. After that, breakfast became even more tense. Meadow, pouring herself coffee, casually mentioned new expenses. "Estelle, I bought milk yesterday. It went up 20 cents, and bread is now $2.89. Or, "The electric bill was higher than usual. Someone must be using the air conditioner a lot." She didn't accuse anyone directly, but the implication was clear. Every sip of coffee, every bite of bread, every minute the air conditioner ran. It all cost money that someone had to pay. The children reacted to my presence in different ways. Ivy was polite but distant. She answered questions in monosyllables and didn't share any news from school. When I tried to strike up a conversation about her hobbies, she would reply, "Yeah, it's okay," or "I don't know," and go back to her phone. One evening, I saw Ivy sitting at the dining table with her textbooks, frowning over a math problem. I came closer. It was algebra, equations with 2 unknowns. I used to be pretty good at math, even helping the neighbor kids with their homework. "Having trouble?" I asked. Ivy looked up and gave me a sidelong glance. "Yeah, this system of equations. I can't figure out how to substitute correctly." I sat down next to her and looked at the problem. It was a fairly simple system that could be solved by substitution or addition. "Let's try this," I began, picking up a pen. "First, from the first equation, we express—" "Ivy, what's going on with your math?" I heard Meadow's voice. She came into the living room with her tablet in her hands and saw us at the table. "Grandma Estelle is helping me," Ivy said. "Oh, thank you, of course." Meadow smiled politely. "But my mom already helped me with this topic last week. Ivy just forgot." She walked over to her daughter and sat down on the other side. "Remember, we already went over this? First, we find the common denominator, then we subtract one equation from the other." Meadow took a pen and began to explain. Ivy nodded, asking questions from time to time. I sat there feeling out of place. After a few minutes, I got up and went to my room. Communication with Hunter was a little better. Maybe it was because he was older and less dependent on his parents' opinions. Or maybe it was because he really didn't like being in the basement and sometimes came upstairs just to talk to someone. One evening, when my parents were watching TV in the living room and Ivy was doing her homework, Hunter knocked on my door. "Grandma, can I come in?" "Of course, dear." He came in and looked around. The room still bore traces of his presence. There was a forgotten plastic cup on the windowsill and a single sneaker lying in the corner. "How do you like it here?" he asked, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "It's okay. How do you like the basement?" Hunter grimaced. "It's damp down there, and it smells weird, like an old gym. Plus, my parents are always going to the laundromat, which is right next to my room. The washing machine is so loud. I felt sorry for him. A 16-year-old boy who had been kicked out of his own room for the sake of a grandmother he knew next to nothing about. Hunter, I feel really bad that you have to— Come on, he waved his hand. Mom says it's temporary. You'll find a job and move out, right? Of course, I'm trying really hard. Is it that hard to find a job at your age? A direct question. I wondered how to answer honestly without sounding too pessimistic. Yes, it's pretty hard. Employers prefer younger employees. I see. Hunter nodded. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? 67. Wow, you're old. He grinned, but not maliciously. How old was Grandpa Roland when he died? 62. He was still young. Hunter thought for a moment. I don't remember him very well. I remember he gave me toy cars for my birthday. He loved you very much. And Ivy, too. Yes, Mom told me. We were silent for a moment. The TV was on in the living room, and we could hear the voices of the hosts of some program. Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course. Don't touch the things I left here. I'll take them gradually, but for now, just leave them where they are, okay? Okay, Hunter. And don't move the furniture around. I think when I come back, I want everything to be the way it was. He got up from the bed and walked to the door. Good night, Grandma. Good night, dear. It was the longest conversation I ever had with my grandson, and the most honest. Curtis was coming home less and less often. He left early in the morning and came back late at night when everyone had already gone to their rooms. On weekends, he found things to do in the garage or in the yard, avoiding family gatherings. One Saturday morning, I met him in the kitchen. He was standing at the coffee maker in his work clothes, even though it was Saturday. Working today? I asked. Yeah, emergency call. A woman's air conditioner broke down and she has a small child. He poured coffee into a travel mug without looking at me. Curtis, is everything okay? Yes, Mom, everything's fine. Just a lot of work. But I could see he was avoiding my gaze. My son had felt uncomfortable in his own home ever since his mother had moved in. Maybe I should look for another place. I don't want to be a burden. Mom, don't. Everything's fine. Mido is doing fine. The kids are getting used to it. Just give everyone some time. He drank his coffee in one gulp, kissed me on the cheek, and left. I was left alone in the kitchen, listening to his car start up in the driveway. Time. Everyone asked for time. But how much time does it take to get used to having someone in your house who isn't very welcome there? The second week ended with another tally of expenses. This time the amount was higher, $91. Meadow explained that electricity had gone up, plus I had been using the washing machine more often. Estelle, I don't mind you doing laundry, but the washing machine uses a lot of water and electricity. Maybe you should wash less often, but in larger loads? I nodded and promised to be more economical. I took the money out of my wallet. The bills were crumpled from being counted so many times. Each payment brought me closer to the moment when the money would run out completely. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I lay there listening to the sounds of the house, which were becoming familiar but never felt like home. Someone went to the bathroom, the floorboards creaked, the refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Strange sounds in a strange house where I was tolerated out of politeness. The conflict began with an envelope that Mido brought to my room on Wednesday evening. Inside was an electricity bill, $173 instead of the usual $138. Estelle, we need to talk. Mido sat down on the edge of my bed, holding the bill in her hands. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed irritation. Look at these numbers. Last month we spent $35 more than usual on electricity. She showed me the columns of numbers. The biggest jump was in the last 3 weeks, right after I moved in. I checked all the appliances in the house, the refrigerator, washing machine, dishwasher. Everything is working as usual. The only change is that you're living in Hunter's room. Meadow stood up and walked over to the air conditioner under the window. It was an old window unit that hummed and rattled when it was running. Hunter never turned on the air conditioner in his room. He said he never got hot, and you turn it on every day. It was true. It was still 80 degrees in Arizona in October, and without air conditioning, the small room was stuffy. I turned it on for a couple of hours in the evening so I could sleep. I understand that you're hot, Meadow continued, but air conditioning is the most energy-intensive appliance in the house, especially one that's this old. She tapped the case and it rang with a metallic clang. Estelle, everyone in Arizona pays for air conditioning, but not everyone can afford it. The phrase sounded like a sentence. Meadow didn't say outright, "You can't afford it," but the meaning was clear. "How much will it cost?" I asked. "If this continues, your share of the electricity bill will be about $60 a month instead of $45. Plus, bills usually go up in the fall." Meadow put the bill back in the envelope. "I'm not saying you shouldn't use the air conditioner at all. Just think about whether you really need it every day." After she left, I sat in my room and thought about how much each hour of cool air cost. $15 a month was 3 extra trips to the supermarket or a pack of blood pressure medication. Money I was running out of. The next day, I tried to talk to Curtis. I waited for him to come home from work and caught him in the garage, where he was unloading tools from his truck. "Curtis, Meadow and I had a talk yesterday about the electricity bill." My son put the box of wrenches on the workbench and turned to me. His eyes showed fatigue, not just from the workday, but from the whole situation. "Yes, Mom, she told me. She said the bill went up because of the air conditioner." "I don't want to cause any trouble. Maybe I should find another place?" Curtis rubbed his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of machine oil on his skin. "Mom, she's right, in principle. Air conditioners really do use a lot of energy, and we don't have any money to spare." He began putting his tools away in drawers without looking at me. "You know we have a mortgage, a car payment, kids growing up. Every dollar counts." "I understand, Curtis. Try to get by without the air conditioner. Open the windows in the evening when it cools down. Lots of people do." Curtis closed the toolbox and headed for the garage door. "I need to get dinner. We'll talk later." He left, and I stood there surrounded by the smell of motor oil and metal. We'll talk later. But we both knew there wouldn't be a later. That night, I lay in bed without air conditioning. The window was open, but the air outside was almost as hot as it was in the room. The sheets stuck to my body, and my pillow was damp with sweat. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Cars drove by, and air conditioners hummed in neighboring houses. I tried to fall asleep and thought about how many little things in my life depended on someone else's wallet. A hot shower, an extra piece of bread, the light in my room after 10 o'clock at night. Everything had a price, and everything had to be accounted for. The next day, I sat down at a computer in the local library and started looking for information about nursing homes in the area. If I couldn't find a job and couldn't pay for living with my son, I had to explore other options. Sunset Manor, the same place where I had been interviewed, charged $2,400 a month for a room with a roommate. Golden Years residence was $2,700. Desert Springs Senior Living was $3,100. Even the cheapest option would eat up my savings in 2 months. And then what? Public housing for low-income seniors had waiting lists years long. I found the Maricopa County Social Services website and read about subsidized housing for seniors. The waiting list for an apartment was between 18 months and 3 years. Requirements: income below the poverty line, no other housing options, proof of health status. Applications could be submitted online. I read the application and realized that even if I submitted the documents today, I would get housing in a year and a half at best. Where would I live until then? There was one other option: sell my house and rent something cheap with the money. But the real estate market wasn't great, and the house needed repairs. At best, I would have gotten $70,000 or $80,000, which would have been enough for 5 or 6 years of modest living. But that meant burning my bridges for good. I returned home that evening feeling depressed. The numbers in my head added up to a bleak picture. Little money, even fewer options, and time working against me. After dinner, I sat in my room and sorted through the photos from the box I had brought from home. Here was our wedding with Roland. I was 24, he was 26. We were laughing and believing that a long, happy life lay ahead of us. Here was Curtis at 3 years old, sitting on his father's shoulders in the park. Here's our whole family at Christmas in 1987. Curtis is 15, a sullen teenager, but he still lets me hug him. Here's a photo taken 5 years ago on Roland's birthday, his last birthday. He's 62, already starting to gray but still strong and hard-working. We're sitting on the porch of our house. He's hugging me around the shoulders, and we're both smiling at the camera. Back then, it seemed like we had so much time. Roland died 3 months after this photo was taken. He had a heart attack at work, at the auto repair shop, where he had worked for over 30 years. His colleagues said he just sat down on a chair, complained of chest pains, and lost consciousness. He didn't make it to the hospital. I held the photo in my hands and cried, quietly so no one would hear. I cried because Roland wasn't there for me at the most difficult moment of my life, because I had no one to call, no one to turn to for help. That at 67, I had become a burden to my own son. Around midnight, I heard someone walking around in the kitchen. Quiet footsteps, the sound of the refrigerator opening, water running. I waited a few minutes, then put on my robe and left the room. Mito was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and a tablet in her hands. She saw me and looked up. "Can't sleep?" "Yes, it's a little hot." Mito nodded toward the kettle. "Make yourself some chamomile tea. It helps you relax." I made the tea and sat down across from her at the table. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the clock ticking in the living room. "Estelle, I want you to understand one thing," Meadow finally said, putting down her tablet. "This isn't personal." She looked me in the eyes. "I have nothing against you as a person. You're a good woman, a good mother. Curtis loves you. The kids respect you." Meadow took a sip of tea. "But we have plans. We want to expand the house, add another bedroom. Curtis dreams of opening his own air conditioning repair shop. That takes money, and we're saving up." "I understand." We put aside $300 every month. That adds up to $3,600 a year. In 2 years, that's more than $7,000. That's enough for a down payment on the addition or equipment for the workshop. Meadow pointed toward my room. "Your presence here eats into those savings. Not just the direct costs of food and utilities, but all the little things. More laundry, more hot water, more electricity." "Mito, I'm willing to pay more." "It's not just about the money. The house is designed for 4 people, and there are 5 of us living here. 1 bathroom for everyone, 1 kitchen, less space for each person." She stood up and walked over to the sink, rinsing her cup. "Estelle, I'm not a mean woman. If we had more money or more space, I wouldn't mind you living with us permanently. But right now, we don't have that option." Mito turned to me. "I hope you find a job or another solution, but I can't pretend that your presence here isn't causing problems." She picked up her tablet and headed for the kitchen door. "Good night, Estelle. Good night." I was left alone in the kitchen with my cooling tea. Meadow was right. It really wasn't personal. It was just math. 5 people in a house for 4, expenses that were growing, plans that had to be put on hold. I was the variable in their equation that was throwing off the balance. I finished my tea, rinsed the cup, and went back to my room. I lay down in bed, which was hot and stuffy, but I didn't dare turn on the air conditioner. I listened to the air conditioners humming in other rooms of the house and thought about how some comforts weren't for everyone. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Cars passed by infrequently, and life went on. And I lay in a strange room in a strange house, trying to figure out how to get out of a situation that was becoming more and more hopeless with each passing day. In the morning, I was awakened by the sound of a coffee maker. Meadow was getting ready for work, as always, precisely and methodically. I lay there listening to the familiar sounds of morning in a strange house, knowing that today I had to make decisions. I saw a job posting on the bulletin board at Fry's food stores. It was a short note on a white card. "Packing job available, part-time, no experience necessary, see manager." No age requirements, no promises of career advancement. Just a job. The manager turned out to be a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a name tag that said, Carol. She looked me over and asked if I could stand on my feet for 4 hours straight and lift boxes weighing up to 10 pounds. "I can," I replied. "Good. You start tomorrow, 8 a.m. to noon, Monday through Friday. $9 an hour, no insurance, pay every 2 weeks. No interviews, no reference checks, just a job that no one really wanted." The next morning, for the first time in a month and a half, I got up with a purpose. I put on comfortable shoes, tied my hair back, and arrived at the store at 7:30. Carol took me to the storage room behind the sales floor and showed me my workstation. Your job is to pack the goods into boxes for delivery. Here's the order list, here are the goods on the shelves, and here are the boxes. Nothing complicated. She showed me how to scan barcodes, how to pack fragile items correctly, and how to tape the boxes. The work was simple, almost meditative. Take the item from the shelf, scan it, put it in the box, tape it, stick on the address. Repeat. The first day went by quickly. My hands ached from the unfamiliar exertion. My legs were buzzing, but I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Usefulness. Someone needed those boxes of groceries, and it was important to them that they were properly packaged and sent to the right address. 2 weeks later, I received my first paycheck, $280 after taxes. It was a ridiculous amount compared to what I had earned at the clinic, but it was my money, earned, not given out of pity. At home, I put the envelope with my paycheck on the kitchen table while Mito was cooking dinner. "I got my first paycheck," I said. Mito turned away from the stove, wiped her hands on a towel, and took the envelope. She counted the bills. $280. Not bad for a part-time job. She took out a yellow folder with checks and a calculator. "Your share for the last 2 weeks is $93. Can you give it to me now?" I gave her the $93 from the envelope. 187 remained. "Now everything is fair," said Mito, putting the money away. "You work, you pay your share, you live like everyone else." There was relief in her voice. The problem was solved, the balance restored. I was no longer a burden and was now just a lodger. But something had changed, not only in Meadows' attitude toward me, but also in my attitude toward this house. I no longer tried to fit into family life, didn't sit down with them to watch TV in the evenings, didn't offer to help in the kitchen. I bought my own food. Simple things that could be cooked in the microwave or eaten without cooking. Bread, canned food, yogurt, frozen dinners. I ate in my room, watching the news on my phone or reading library books. I washed my clothes separately when no one was home. I lived a parallel life in the same house. The children got used to my presence as part of the interior. Hunter sometimes nodded at me as he passed by, and Ivy greeted me politely if she saw me in the kitchen. Curtis still avoided long conversations, but at least he didn't look guilty anymore. The job gave me not only money, but also company. There were 3 other people working in the warehouse. Marcus, a 25-year-old guy who dreamed of becoming a programmer. Tina, a 40-year-old single mother working 2 jobs. And Dolores, a woman my age with short gray hair and quick movements. Dolores Castillo was 64 years old and had been working as a packer for 3 years, ever since the restaurant where she had been a cook closed down. She lived alone in a small studio apartment in an old neighborhood where the rent was affordable. "I like working with young people," she said, nodding toward Marcus and Tina. "They remind me that life doesn't end at 60. Dolores had the rare gift of not complaining about life, even when she had plenty of reasons to. Her husband had died 7 years ago, her children lived in other states, and her pension was only enough to cover the bare necessities. But she came to work every morning with a smile on her face. "You know what I like about this job?" she asked me once during our lunch break. "You pack a box, and you know you've done something useful. Maybe it's medicine for someone who's sick. Maybe it's groceries for a family with children. Your hands helped someone get what they needed." We sat in a tiny break room, eating sandwiches we'd brought from home and drinking coffee from the vending machine. "Where do you live, Estelle?" "I'm staying with my son for now, temporarily." Dolores nodded understandingly. "I'm renting a studio on Thunderbird Road. It's $500 a month, but it's expensive for one person. I'm thinking of finding a roommate to split the rent." She looked at me appraisingly. "Are you interested? It's small but clean. Quiet neighborhood, bus stop nearby." I thought about it. $500 split between 2. That's $250 a month for rent, plus utilities, food, transportation. With my salary of $560 a month, it would be tight, but doable. "Can I see it?" "Sure, let's go after work if you want." The apartment was in a 1-story house from the 70s, divided into 4 studios. 20 square meters, a tiny kitchen, a combined bathroom, 1 window facing east. The furniture was old but clean. A sofa bed, a table, 2 chairs, a small refrigerator, and a stove with 2 burners. It's not a palace, but the roof doesn't leak, and the neighbors are quiet, Dolores said. I sleep on the sofa, and you can put the bed here by the window. There's not much space, but if you're tidy, it's quite comfortable. I imagined myself in this tiny room, sharing space with a woman I hardly knew. No privacy, no comfort, but no expense reports, no guilty looks, no feeling that you're in the way. I need to think about it. Of course, take your time. I thought a lot that weekend. I counted and recounted the numbers, weighed all the pros and cons. $250 for rent, plus $50 for utilities, plus $200 for food and essentials. That's $500 a month. With a salary of $560, I would have $60 left for unexpected expenses. Very little, but enough to survive. The main thing was that I would be independent. I wouldn't have to explain to anyone why I turned on the air conditioner or why I ate an extra piece of bread. I could live according to my own schedule, eat what I liked, and see who I wanted. On Monday morning, while packing another order, I told Dolores, I accept your offer. Really? Great. Dolores smiled. When can you move in? In a week, probably. I need to talk to my family. On Wednesday evening, when everyone gathered in the kitchen after dinner, I announced my decision. I found a new place to live. I'm going to rent an apartment with a coworker. Curtis looked up from the newspaper and stared at me in surprise. Mom, what about, are you sure this is a good idea? His eyes showed his confusion. On the one hand, he was probably relieved that the problem was solving itself. On the other hand, he felt awkward about kicking his mother out of the house. Meadow reacted more practically. Where is it and how much does it cost? A studio on Thunderbird Road, $250 a month for my half. Not bad. Meadow nodded. Can you afford it? Yes, my salary will be enough. Meadow looked relieved. Business-like relief, no emotion, problem solved, life moving forward, everyone happy. When are you moving? She asked. This weekend, if possible. Of course. Curtis will help you with your things. Curtis nodded, though he still looked uncertain. Mom, are you sure? Maybe you should think about it some more? I've already thought about it, Curtis. It's better for everyone. Hunter and Ivy listened to the conversation in silence. To them, I was a temporary lodger who was finally vacating the space. Hunter was probably already planning how he would return to his room. On Saturday morning, I packed the same 2 suitcases I had arrived with a month and a half ago. The only additions were a box of groceries I had bought separately and a couple of books from the library. Curtis loaded the suitcases into his pickup truck while I went around the house to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. There was no trace of me left in Hunter's room. The bed was made, the desk was clean, and the closet was empty. It was as if I had never been there. Mito stood in the kitchen doorway, holding a yellow folder with receipts in her hands. Estelle, you still owe me for last week. $27. I gave her $30. Thanks, and good luck. Thanks for taking me in. We shook hands like business partners after closing a deal. Ivy waved at me from the living room window, polite, without much emotion. But Hunter surprised me. As we were getting into the car, he came out of the house and walked over to the pickup. Grandma, wait. He opened the door on my side and unexpectedly hugged me. Tightly, genuinely, for the first time in all the time I had been in that house. See you, he said quietly. Of course, dear. It was the only glimpse of genuine warmth I had ever seen. A 16-year-old boy who may have understood something about life, about how hard it is to be an adult, about how sometimes people find themselves in situations beyond their control. We drove through the familiar streets of Scottsdale, and I looked out the window at the houses, the shops, the traffic lights. Everything was the same, but I was different. Not a mother asking her son for help, not a burden tolerated out of politeness. Just a woman who works, pays her rent, and lives her life. Mom, are you sure you'll be okay? Curtis asked when we pulled up to the house on Thunderbird Road. I will be, Curtis. Everything will be fine. And for the first time in a long time, I really believed it.